Okay, well, this is, what episode are we on now? Episode 4?
We don't even
4?
we don't even use consistent numbering. So it is, I think, isn't it the 5th?
The 5th episode,
Fifth actual
episode
session.
0.4.
Yeah, because number 1 was 0.0.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah, we're dumb.
Yeah. Dumb and awesome.
We'll get used to it by the time season 1 starts.
Wonder how old we'll be. Awesome.
So I'm at your house right now.
Right down in beautiful Bothell, Washington.
Yeah, which is not too far from where I live. It's kind of weird that I haven't bothered to get off my ass and visit in this.
Yeah, we've lived about a 3-hour car drive from each other for 3 years now. But if it makes you feel better, I have many friends in that same boat. So
it's hard. I mean, not to beat a dead horse about how little spare time we've got, but especially now that we've got a kid. Like I don't own a car, right? So renting something and coming down here with a kid that doesn't like being in a car has not been an ideal vacation.
And I have a border phobia, because I have one of my many phobias. That plus, especially with my weird visa status, whatever the hell it is I'm on, I tend to be quite conservative about making international trips.
Yeah.
So.
We were totally in the same boat. So for anyone, I guess, not in the know who happens to be listening to this in 2020 or whatever, it starts becoming popular to listen to us.
Optimism.
So you're on what, a TN right now?
So that's a good question, because I don't fully understand it. It's a really weird, wonky situation. So the easy answer is yes. I am on it's not a
TN
visa.
Or something.
I'm on TN status.
Yeah.
And my TN status ends early next year. So I have a accepted application for an H-1B visa, and that has, I think, now been processed, but it is processed to begin just before my TN ends.
Yeah.
And I understand that normally what you do is you leave the country and re-enter to reactivate, but they did some special processing where that's not the case. It's just a straight adjustment of status scheduled for the future.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, I'm also going through some sort of green card process that has multiple stages, each of which has some complicated name that is it's not like a numbered sequence or anything. And I'm on some stage, I-5 something, I don't know. But that gives me something called EAD, which is employment authorization something. And so I have like multiple statuses and future statuses, and it's wild. Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you what any of the terms are other than TN and TD and H-1B, because back in 2011, I believe it was, we were in Australia, and my wife and I, and we moved, and so she went to San Francisco and I went to Vancouver. So she totally went through the same situation where she went on a TN and then eventually applied for green card and whatnot, and I eventually decided that living apart was not the best way to be spending our years. So
I imagine it was a mutual decision.
Actually.
Pause
100%.
Pause for a second, just to set some context. We're all Canadian.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's clear. So actually, that's part of the whole. I guess the vagabond thing we're going with.
Yeah. I'm an international citizen.
You particularly. I have experienced living abroad in a few countries. I'm currently out of my wonderful homeland, possibly for the long run. So that's
your home and native land.
My home and native, true patriots, love land, whatever.
So I mean, we kind of went through the same situation where Andrea was on the TN and started to go through the green card process, and then I went there with TD status,
which is the dependent status for TN.
It's the status where basically you are allowed to be a student or you're allowed to live at home, and you can spend money and help the economy flourish in that way, but you're not allowed to do anything to bolster the economy through productive means.
No, that's not true. You're allowed to volunteer. You are allowed to volunteer.
You can volunteer, but that in theory is dumb.
In theory.
In my theory. Yeah, but like, you can't babysit or wash dishes or something like that through legal means.
You cannot be employed.
Yeah.
Ultimately, yes.
Yeah. People can't trade you things for your work.
Yeah, which is weird because since you can volunteer. I mean, sometimes you volunteer and you get
A T-shirt.
Yeah, or like free lunch. Maybe that's illegal. I don't know. We haven't touched any of that.
Yeah.
I'm like terrified to.
Yeah, that was the thing, right? Is like I was completely paranoid about that.
Yep.
We had a kid, and we decided that we wanted him to be dual citizen because we were in the country, and why not open doors for someone? So especially since we had that goal of making that happen, I didn't want to rock the boat and attempt to do anything illegal that could see me getting kicked out of the country and never be allowed back in.
But just for that reason.
Yeah. I mean, what... Yeah.
I think it's a worthwhile point mentioning too. You, correct me if I'm wrong, at the time anyway, you never moved to the United States with any sort of long-term intention to stay here forever. It was kind of my dig. I don't even know.
We don't have long-term plans, period.
Yeah. But I mean, it's relevant because you did have a short-term plan to leave. Is that correct?
No. We honestly just didn't have a plan at all.
Okay.
That was part of the reason we went our separate ways after Australia to begin with is when my contract was finishing up there, I'm kind of paranoid about employment and whatnot. And so I started looking for jobs months in advance because I worked in film, and that's just the nature of the industry for the most part is everyone is a contract employee, you work for the project, and then that's over. Everyone disperses, goes on to another project at another company. So when I knew that my contract was ending in like September or something, in May I started looking for work, and I found work in Vancouver. And so through a friend of a friend, Andrea became aware of an opportunity in San Francisco, and she says, well, I may as well apply. The worst that happens is I don't get the job.
Yeah, right.
You always just do that. And I think we were applying for stuff at the same time, and she just never heard back. And so I heard back from my company. I'm like, okay, let's do it.
And you were both in Vancouver initially, I think, right?
No, sort of. So this was still, I'm talking while we were in Australia that this happened.
But were you applying to the same place? Like
we were applying. I applied in London and LA and Vancouver. We cast a wide net.
But I mean, I guess my question: you went into this ready to kind of go different ways if necessary from the get-go. Because that's a fascinating part of your story. Because
it wasn't our plan.
We were very different.
No, the plan was we would go to the same place together.
Right.
But we both just applied to places, and we just figured we'd wait and see what happened. And so I heard back first, and she hadn't heard back at all.
Right.
And so then I accepted it in Vancouver, and then right before we were about to move, like within weeks of us moving to Vancouver, they finally got back to her, and they're like, yeah, we'd love to find out more, let's interview you, whatnot. And she went through that, and so I was I had accepted a 4-month contract in Vancouver, and she ended up getting a permanent position in San Francisco. So that's what made it make sense for us to go the separate ways, is that I could go to Vancouver, live out that contract, get some money. All of our belongings at that point were in Toronto, so we had like a moving bonus. I shipped stuff to Vancouver, and then I could start paring down on stuff and actually sorting through that stuff that we didn't have time before we went to Australia. So I went there under the impression that I'd be there for 4 months, and then I would go to San Francisco and join her for her long-term job.
Right.
And we had no further plan after that.
Okay.
So she started the application for green card. My contract ended up getting extended, and it was only for a few extra months, so I figured, okay, why not? Like, it's very easy to just take an extension when it's only for a couple months, right?
Yeah.
And that ended up being a year and a half that we were apart.
Wow.
And because
that could be another podcast episode, I'm sure.
It could. And it's just easy for time to pass without you realizing what's happening.
Well, when you're busy, I mean, I know you had a lot going on at the time.
Like
she was probably busy with her job as well, I assume. Yeah.
Yeah, like I was working 60-hour weeks or more. Like I worked, I guess it was more than 60-hour weeks, because I worked 7-day weeks for 4 months straight. And it's just like, you've got no concept of time passing. It's just you're getting your stuff done.
Yeah.
Anyway, we eventually circumstances allowed us to give that up, and I went to San Francisco. She was on the green card application, and I was on TD status. So
you literally just go up to the border and.
Yeah.
Well, I'm curious because I know you entered without her.
Yeah.
And I think if you enter together, it's pretty smooth sailing. But without her, I think it's like you have to get the lawyers involved or something. Was there anything to do? No, just.
I had to get a copy of all her stuff. Like I had to.
So what's her stuff? Like her application documents?
I don't even remember the exact documentation I needed, but I know I needed like a copy of her pay, a copy of our marriage certificate, a copy of her visa or whatever, like a photocopy of all that, just so that I could prove that she has permission to be there and I'm married to her.
And did they go through all that, or did they like
grill
you on stuff?
Yeah, so I drove up to the border, and so when you drive through the border, like I did 2 days ago, you drive from Vancouver down to America, and it's the Peace Arch crossing. There's just it's like a toll booth basically. You drive through, you show them the documents, and they wave you on. But if you're not just visiting, if you actually need to do secondary stuff, they flag you to drive into the parking lot, and then you have to go in the building. And
so you drove in?
Yeah, I rented a car because I took all our belongings with us.
Okay.
So, which was funny because while she was living there, I ended up visiting a few times. And so what I would do is every time I would visit her, I would take a suitcase full of our belongings.
Nice.
Nice. So I took a suitcase of our belongings every time I visited. And then when I moved, I rented a car, and that whole car was it was like Tetris with all of our belongings, and then whatever, like there were a few belongings that at the end I just couldn't fit in the car, and I was like, well, I guess this is going in this dumpster.
Yeah. So you would have been flagged even if you were just visiting, I'm sure, with the car load like that.
Yeah. But obviously I was intending on moving. It was funny because the border guard, one of the questions he asked when I was applying for my dependency status is he's looked at my stuff and he's like, are you going to be working when you're here? And I was like, nope. And I was like, what are you going to be doing? And I was like, playing video games.
Ballsy, man. I'm like so petrified by these border guards. I'm always like, I'd probably give this detailed like situational answer or something. Or did he just chuckle and wave you on or roll his eyes? Or what?
The security guards never laugh, but he just like looked at me and he's like, good luck with that.
Yeah, well.
Yeah, and so that was that. And like I got my little piece of paper and my passport, and I drove the rest of the way. And so I found it, I didn't love being in America.
And a lot of that was situational, I think.
It's totally situational.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I've visited America before. It's a great place to visit. But I'm a bit of a workaholic, I guess. At the time, like, we were trying to still do our indie game stuff.
Yeah.
Which I guess is a whole other podcast as well.
That's a few other podcasts.
Yeah, so I had a lot of stuff that I wanted to do, and if an American couple comes to Canada, the permits that are granted allow the spouse to work. When you go to Australia, the permits that are granted allow the spouse to work. I believe the same is true for the UK as well, and many other countries. And when you come here,
Here being the United States.
when you come to the U.S., specifically on that TN status, and at the time the H-1B status as well, the spouse is not allowed to work.
Yeah.
And it's very hard for someone like me who, I guess particularly at that time, I largely identified myself by my career.
Interesting.
And it's hard to all of a sudden be told you're not allowed to work.
Yeah. I guess it's worth noting, like, of course, you could go and find your own employment and then get your own TN visa or something. I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you tried, am I right?
I don't know the legalities of that, actually. Like, I don't know if you're allowed to job hunt from within the States.
I also don't know. I was under the impression you were allowed. I tend to be super conservative. Maybe you are too.
Yeah.
Kind of just careful, right? So I would probably also... Yeah.
I don't know the legalities of that. I didn't put much effort into it, but legitimately I did send a couple of emails out. Or actually, they weren't even necessarily emails. It's just you go onto the website and fill out the form with your resume and whatnot. The problem that I had is that because my address was the U.S., I don't know if I was passed on to different HR people than would normally deal with international applications or what, but like they all...
No one had any idea?
No one had any idea how to deal with me. They all just thought I could start the next day and didn't need any paperwork, or they didn't know how to deal with the paperwork and stuff. And so... And
that would suck too when it's a smaller company. Like I'm sure like say Microsoft or Google or something, they recognize what to do at some point in the process.
But not every company has lawyers specific. Yeah.
Army of lawyers.
what a Freudian slip that was, liars. But yeah, so I mean, not every company hires immigration lawyers specifically to help people out with that sort of stuff. So it was a frustrating thing where I was being offered roles in Canada and in the UK and in India and I think Australia and Japan as well. But I just couldn't find anything in San Francisco.
Which is wild when you think about it.
Yeah.
That is wild. Yeah. How long were you in San Francisco total?
2013 until 2015.
So was that like a full 2 years, year and a half-ish kind of?
2 years and a couple months. And that was me. Like I said, Andrew was there a little bit longer before me, right?
Before you'd gone, right?
A year and a quarter or something before me.
Cool.
So, yeah, it's weird because, I mean, culturally our countries are so similar, right?
Yep.
Like, there's some minor things, like we have Trudeau, you guys might have Trump. Minor things.
Americans say sorry. I just can't get over that one.
Yeah, sorry versus sorry.
Borrow, etc.
Yeah. So it's weird because culturally we're quite similar, and so living in the city, as a Canadian growing up, all we hear is about American gun violence and gangs and stuff, and I was probably way more scared of coming here than I should have been.
For the record, I'm identical. I would say, yeah.
That's just how we all think, isn't it?
It is.
And everyone's got preconceptions and prejudices, and then you meet reality and like, oh, well, I was dumb.
Yep, it's the same.
Unless you meet reality and you just cover your ears and sing loudly.
Yep. Okay, well, shall I tell my little side of the story? Well, let me kind of, taking what you just said as a segue here. When I was very little, so my mom is from Ontario, and we're from Nova Scotia, which is really the sticks. It's very far from any border with the States, that's for sure. But anyway...
It's not too far from Maine, but...
Yeah, is Maine the States? I guess so. Yeah. Anyway, when we'd... every summer vacation, I'd go to Ontario and live out my days there for a few months when I was growing up. And my parents like to go shopping in New York State, or my mom, I should say, my mom and my grandmother. So whenever we crossed the border, my mom would always say to me, like, "You're in America now, hold my hand, don't go to my site, it's so dangerous, oh my God." And
I was like that in Prince Edward Island.
well, so I don't think my mother was like, she wasn't anti-American or anything silly like that. And I don't even think it was like she really thought that. It was more like, we're in a different country, don't go to my site. But my youthful self interpreted it that way. Like, this is this war zone now that you've crossed the border. Everyone has a gun, be on high alert at all times. So it really grew into this phobia. Like, no joke. Like, I had this USA phobia growing up. Really, like, being in the States, I would like literally be nervous the whole time.
Yeah.
And I mean, as an adult, of course, I'm a very logical, rational person. Statistically, there's more gun violence. Statistically, there's more this, there's more that.
Statistically, there's more guns.
Statistically, there's a lot more guns, yes. But I mean, it's not a war zone. It's not that crazy. And yet that phobia that was built into me in my youth kind of persisted.
Yeah.
And then add that to a few prior bad experiences at borders, and just, I don't know, maybe a few prior bad experiences with people who happen to be from the States. And I was very apprehensive about taking a job in the States at first. I mean, I was excited, and like I'm always happy to move to a new country and check out a new place. But I was very, I intended from the start to be like super cautious and like jet as soon as I figured things weren't working out. You know what I mean? Like, I kind of took that attitude, like it just wouldn't work out from the start, I guess. I don't know. So that was my feeling for that. Anyway, back to my story. I was working in Vancouver, Canada. Actually, we lived about a 5-minute walk from each other at the time. And I was not super happy with my job situation. My wife and I were kind of starting to actively look at other places to live. We had just taken a little train trip across Canada to evaluate a few other cities even. We looked at Ottawa, Montreal, more Eastern Canadian cities. And then my current company approached me, and they were in the Seattle area. I was excited about the opportunity, so I took the interview. It worked out. I got the job. Everything was great. The peculiar part about my story, I guess, a lot simpler than yours, but we did move down here, my wife and I, but my wife is not a Canadian citizen. So that gets weird when you go down to the United States on TN status, because if you're both Canadian citizens, you and your spouse, the working spouse becomes a TN, and the dependent spouse becomes TD, and those are both statuses. So it's a TN status and a TD status. Yeah. But those statuses are only available to Canadian citizens.
And Mexicans.
And Mexican, yes, correct. I think it's TN1 and TN2 or something. They're designated slightly differently. Yeah. Anyway, whatever. But my wife was not eligible for TN status, but she's eligible for an actual TN visa. And then to get a visa, you can't just go up to the border and get the visa stamped in your passport. You need to apply for it. And to apply for her TD visa, I needed to be in the United States working on a TN status. So we moved out of our place in Vancouver. We had all our things shipped down, and she had no place to be. She actually ended up going to my parents' house for a few weeks while we worked all this out. So I came to the United States, started working, and I forget, there was like quite a holdup because I think they needed a pay stub or something. Like they needed all these things, a very specific list to apply. And then of course she had to apply in person, and you have to submit for an appointment online, and then only certain consulates in Canada will do it. And
that must be easy from Nova Scotia.
Well, the weird thing was, I remember certain places had these huge wait lists, and Vancouver was like, don't go to Vancouver. They have this enormous wait list. If you make an appointment, you'll be there like 2 months, and all these things. And I talked to the lawyer, my company's lawyer, and he said, I mentioned that my wife was going to go and stay with my parents, and he said, Nova Scotia, they have the shortest wait times. It's going to be great. So my wife flew to Nova Scotia and went and made an appointment. And you can check the wait times, and it was listed as like 4 days or something in Nova Scotia. Great. She goes and makes an appointment. They say, we no longer do that here. Thank you. Yeah, it was brutal. Nice. Yeah, it was brutal. But what ended up ultimately happening was she did manage to get an appointment in Vancouver. We waited for the appointment time. She flew to Vancouver and stayed with a friend and went to the appointment, got the visa right away, and came down. So it worked out magically. She just kind of went to Nova Scotia for a month
Yeah.
or so, which is wild. But the good thing was my company paid for all the flights.
Yeah.
So thank you guys. That was nice of you. Wife gets a little Nova Scotia trip.
What's interesting about the lawyer saying that it's difficult in Vancouver is the immigration lawyer was basically telling us the same thing when we were going through the process. They were saying specifically, and you can find anecdotes about this online as well. It's like if you want to go through the Peace Arch to come into the U.S., that's like the place you're most likely to be rejected.
We both flew in because I heard so many bad things with driving in. Yeah.
And that's the thing that I think is bananas about this whole process is that like when you're going for the TD and TN,
right,
it's like up to the discretion of the border guard.
It's wild. I know.
Like
I know. It's wild.
Like
it's
they
wild.
know nothing about what you're doing. Like,
and yet they're allowed to quiz you on your like what this job you're taking is, and if they decide you don't seem like you're legitimately taking that job, they have the discretion to reject you.
If they don't like the cut of your jib, they can reject you. And I mean, you could be sleep deprived, they could be sleep deprived. Like it could be a completely emotional based reason.
Yep.
And it's so weird, and so that's the thing is like apparently that Peace Arch is the number one most place that people are denied their visas.
I wonder if it works that way. The other
statuses,
way.
Sorry.
Yeah, their statuses. Right?
I don't know.
Like U.S. citizens going to Canada, are they faced with the same silliness?
I don't know.
And the result of this too, which we both face this reality, is once you are in the country working.
Yeah,
you're kind of scared to leave and come back.
Yeah,
because on reentry,
they do the same process.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, your status is renewed each time. Where a visa, you have the visa. You have this visa for say 3 years. The status is only a status while you're here, and it has to be renewed when you leave.
Yeah, like I've still got my I mean, just to quickly finish up on that point. So what we were told is not even flying from Vancouver was a safe bet.
Wow.
What they wanted us to do was fly from Victoria. So
you didn't, am I correct? I mean,
I drove.
Yeah.
I drove because as a TD, they can't really find a reason to turn down the TD once the TN has been
right.
Because you're not allowed to do anything except be a stay-at-home spouse.
You're not a threat to the job security of
so
citizens or whatever.
At the time, I don't know if this is still true, but at the time Victoria didn't have the same customs stuff that Vancouver has. So we would fly out of Victoria, and instead of going through customs in Victoria, land in San Francisco, land of the hippies, and
do it there.
And they do it there, and they're just like much more likely to accept people, right?
Well, can you imagine how many Canadians fly there and validate visas in San Francisco every year?
I don't know.
Well, they're probably very experienced, I would imagine. Yeah.
But so that was a weird thing for us. But yeah, it's totally weird when, like you said a moment ago, about how you're kind of afraid to leave the country. Because it's like, when we were living in Australia, you get 4 weeks of vacation a year. Like, that's just the standard thing that everyone in Australia gets. Right. As opposed to the Canadian thing where they give you 2 weeks and then your business will close down at Christmas time. So.
Yep, lived it.
So we actually got vacation in Australia, and we did what all the locals do. We flew to Bali, and we had no problem doing that at all because we had a visa, and like you said, you can leave the country and do whatever. When we were in the U.S., we were like, what happens if we leave and we're rejected? So when we went on vacation, we went to Hawaii because it was like,
that's where we took our honeymoon.
Yeah,
for the same reason. I mean, we were married before we came, but we had just never taken a honeymoon. Yeah. To clarify,
first world problems. Eh? Can you believe we had to go to Hawaii
for our honeymoon, man? Yep. I know,
no, but it's a really weird thing, that status where you have no idea how safe you are or unsafe you are to lose that. And it's definitely, like I said, frustrating for someone like me to live in an American city and just. I played a lot of video games for 2 years because I felt I wasn't allowed to work on a personal project, which I was probably overly paranoid by working on a personal project. But because as long as you're doing stuff for personal growth only, that's fine. But the thing is that as soon as you try selling something, which was my ultimate ambition, it's like the IRS wants their hands on it, and it's not kosher at all.
Not just that, yeah. I mean, they I think they kick you out of the country for 10 years if they find that you were quote unquote working.
Yeah.
Yeah. I always wondered what would happen if you like built something while living in the United States and then you moved somewhere else, back to Canada, for example, and then sold it.
I always find it weird because I'm so, like I said, for lack of a better word, paranoid about that. And yet I've gone to like indie meetup stuff.
Yeah.
Where like
no one else is paranoid and just,
no one else is paranoid at all, and quite the contrary. They like give motivational talks about how open the indie community is around the world, and you should really just take your laptop and travel to other countries and work on your stuff abroad. And it's like,
yep.
Have you looked into this legally? Like,
yeah, I have no idea how that works too. Because like, what about a normal company? They send you to like on a business trip, and so you go to somewhere for 2 weeks, and you're like working. Technically, your company's paying you. I know it's okay.
I guess it all comes down to like, are you going to get caught?
It's,
ultimately,
I think, for
like,
a great many people. Yeah.
Like the odds are extremely low that anyone that matters is ever going to find out and do anything about it. But I don't know. I err on the side of safety, and
it's probably for the best. We're family men now, man. Yeah. I think I told you, actually, I'm not sure, but I have a friend. It's a friend of a friend, and they were a DJ, and they were just doing like touring or whatever. I don't really know, but they were doing shows here and there, and so he did a show in the United States, and he got paid for it. Whoops! Yeah, the end. So what happened was, I don't know the exact details, like if the border guard caught him or what happened or whatever, but
that happens with big bands too. Like,
I imagine, I don't know how it works. They must get some weird. They must be required to get some crazy visa.
Yeah, you have to get like a performer's visa to do that. Like there's been big metal bands that have gone to Toronto and like the singer forgot to get his visa, and so
wild. Well, this guy anyway. I don't know. I mean, I guess he didn't get his visa or whatever, but he's not allowed to come into the United States for 10 years.
Yeah.
It's not even like he's not allowed to get a visa or something. He's not allowed in the country.
Yeah.
Which is crazy. I mean, it's crazy. Part of me says, I understand the they're not just lax or forgiving. Oh, it was just once, get out of here. But man, that's harsh. I mean, if you were this young DJ trying to build a career for yourself, and you're from Canada, which is realistically between Canada and the U.S. about a ninth of the whole market or whatever. If you were limited to that market only, that's brutal, right? And now that's his reality for 10 years because of that mistake. So I assume his career is, if not over, then quite restricted anyway.
I wish I could remember the specifics of it. It's a tangent anyway, but I remember reading something recently about a new tax that's being applied that Canadians, I believe, if they want to perform in the U.S., they end up having to pay some sort of a tax for that, and it's
performance tax or something.
Yeah, I don't know the specifics. I'll try to look it up later or something, but. Yeah, so I mean, despite the legalities of it, like, it was weird because it's like San Francisco's not the most affordable place on earth.
Indeed.
So we were living in the Tenderloin, which it was affordable, but
right.
It's weird to be someone who's like legally not allowed to find a job, and you go outside and you see people smoking crack on the street and people getting arrested, and it's like,
yep. And that's
so
not
so I wasn't
considered
at my happiest state when I was living there, but I can completely identify that like I had friends visit a couple times, and we would go see some of the sites, and it is a great city. There's lots to see. As a tourist, I would 100% recommend it, but I don't think I'm interested in getting involved in the Silicon Valley world and going back there.
Right. Your stories, as well as a lot of stories from other people at my same company who have done the Silicon Valley thing and then ran away from it, certainly, kind of drive me from it as well. I mean, just the costs associated and so forth are quite wild. I guess one more thing I wanted to touch on, just what it's like living in the States and what we were talking about earlier, the fear of leaving. My company they issue travel advisories, and they always say, if you're traveling, here's what you need to be careful of. And they have this big list of stuff you're supposed to bring when you leave to show the border guy when you come back. And it's like quite the list, honestly. Like I have to bring my badge, I have to bring multiple paychecks, I have to bring a copy of all my paperwork. If my wife leaves alone, she has to bring with her like an employment verification letter. Yeah. And then they give you like the specific lines to say. And it's cool they're doing all this for me, but it certainly adds to the paranoia that you're going to get rejected on every time. And I think people our age too, I mean, people are often buying houses, starting families, if your kids are going to school, it's not really an option to be stuck out of the country for like some number of weeks or something while these problems are worked out, right? Or like the money thing too. Like I've never been rejected at the border, but if you were rejected and you were flying in from somewhere,
I don't even know what you'd do. Yeah,
I have no idea how that works. I assume they send you back to where you flew out of, or they and the ticket cost is on you, of course, right?
It'd be bananas, like if you're in like the situation I was in where I had a car full of all my belongings and no apartment.
There's nowhere to go back to. Yeah,
my family's on the East Coast. It's like
it's wild, right? It's totally wild. Yeah. And another interesting thing is being on a TN status. It's kind of infamous in its difference from a H-1B in that you're not allowed to have immigrant intent.
Yeah,
which ultimately that means you're not allowed to make an application for a green card, and
which is so weird because you can still do it.
Well, as far as I understand, your company is allowed to sponsor you for one, and then that's not you declaring intent.
Maybe that's
kind of my understanding.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't think I could just go and say, guys, I'm applying for a green card. So like, if you're not a Canadian citizen, there's a few countries that aren't allowed to do it, but for the most part, you can apply for the green card lottery. Yeah, and I think that's immigrant intent as well. I don't really know. Like, it's really strange, but
we need to get rid of borders.
Yeah, it's wild. It's wild.
I really want like some sort of a UN visa or something that I can just live anywhere I want and do anything I want. And
2016, man, nowhere near it. I don't know. I don't see that happening.
Not anytime soon. We could talk about this for hours. We should get this wrapped up. Before we go, though, games this week. What have you played?
So I have been focused solely on Cave Story. I say solely, like I poured tons of time into it. Maybe a couple hours here and there. I was playing it on hard mode. And hard mode is interesting in that, in my opinion, it's a kind of a poor implementation of hard mode, but instead of increasing the challenges of the game or somehow making the puzzles more interesting, all they do is take out all the power-ups, which ultimately, in my opinion, it makes the game harder, but a lot of like the little puzzles you solve or a lot of the I guess side quests result in you getting a power-up. So playing it in hard mode, the power-ups are still there. The puzzles and the side quests are still there. There's just nothing waiting for you at the end of the tunnel. It's like pointless. So you kind of just walk through the game and skip all that. And the experience is not as fun. Like, I guess you're supposed to play hard mode if you've already beaten the game. I don't know.
That seems like what makes sense to me. Is like if you've already solved the puzzles, maybe it's not...
This would be what you do now because it's not fun anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see that. It actually says, like the disclaimer is, only play this if you've played the normal game. And I saw that and I just thought, of course they're going to say that. But anyway, I played a bit and I thought, I kind of want to enjoy the game and just, experience all of it. So I'm going to restart it on normal mode.
Right.
So that's where I'm at.
Right.
How about you?
After almost 2 months of stuff, I finally finished playing Mass Effect 2.
Nice.
Disclaimer, I work for the company that makes them, so my opinion is that of mine and not of my employer, but I enjoyed the game. I mean, I played the first one before I was hired, so that was part of the reason for me attempting to get to that company.
Was it really? So obviously you enjoyed the first one.
Yeah, I enjoyed the first one. Second one is better. I've got the third one on my plate at some point. I'm not going to start that immediately, but I know there was tons of complaints about the ending at the time.
Yeah.
Which I guess they
I don't think it's possible for us to spoil it since it's been spoiled for us.
Yeah.
I haven't even played the first game, and I'm aware of all the hoolah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I finally finished the second one. I enjoyed it. I recommend it, and I'm still continuing during my commute to try to play Fire Emblem Birthright, and yeah.
Very nice. Very nice. I'm also kind of on the side playing the first Demon's Quest game. I recently kind of rearranged my game setup at home, so it wasn't all set up to be playable for a while, but I'll probably get back into that for the next week or so. Within the next week or so.
There was a sale on the PlayStation Network this week, so I bought Catherine.
Nice.
Which I don't know what year it'll be before I
was going to say, because you need more games, right? Nice.
All right. Well, we should probably wrap this up, and there you go.
Cool. Yeah. I will say one last comment. I mean, I've actually enjoyed my time in the States. It sounds like a bunch of griping. Really, it's the immigration situation and the border situation, the laws and so forth.
The logistics of it.
Yeah, I come here and the people are great, and I've had a very great experience in my company. It's just like anywhere, right? I mean, I'm sure other people would have similar experiences, but it is interesting to focus on those hurdles and those considerations for anyone who is considering a similar
action. That's the thing that's interesting about the international travel is or international living, I guess, is the population generally is fantastic. Yeah. Anywhere you go, like you're going to meet great people to talk to, and that's what really makes your day-to-day life matter, right? Yep. So yeah, I would happily come back if it made sense to. It's definitely just a shame that the government in every country
puts up every wall they can to make you enjoy yourself and do this happily. Yes, indeed. Okay, well, until next time.
Yep.
Take care, everybody.
High five.
Cheers.